I'm so glad you found my podcast, The Accidental Counsellor. This is a story about buying an outback pub and becoming an accidental counsellor. At the moment, I'm sitting out on the veranda after a really long day. The temperature's got up to about 40 degrees today, and it was pretty unbearable. Then a storm came through, rain came, and it cooled it down. It's probably about 25 degrees right now. It's 11:30 at night, and it's quite calm and peaceful here. My name's Jenny Richardson. My husband, Scott, and I own a video production company in Sydney. We have 4 fabulous children, 4 grandchildren, and owning a country pub was never ever on our bucket list. Over the following episodes, I would like to share with you our journey of learning about running a pub, why country pubs are important for communities, some tales of the outback, the history of this amazing building, the region, and a few mysteries involving this country hotel, and how I've ended up becoming an accidental counsellor. An accidental counsellor is defined as anyone, including healthcare professionals, teachers, parents, friends, colleagues, HR or community service workers who are listening and responding to emotional distress. It's not uncommon to find yourself acting as a counsellor. The Buckingham Hotel, which was originally called the Clubhouse, is in Coonamble. Coonamble is about 6 hours northwest of Sydney or an hour and a half north of Dubbo. It's on the edge of the outback, flat, dry and dusty. And if it's not dusty, it's flooding. The region is primarily agriculture, sheep, cattle, wheat, barley, canola, lots of crops. This part of the country is crazy. They still have drovers who move thousands of cattle along the long paddock. The long paddock was developed in the 1860s to move cattle around, and nowadays it's used to give paddocks a rest. Think of the long paddock as a really wide nature strip that goes for thousands of kilometres around the country. It's not uncommon to come across a sign with a big cow and a little cow on it, which tells people that there are cows near or on the road. It's not uncommon in this area to come across drovers with maybe a mob of several thousand cows on or near the road. These drovers live with the cows for several months at a time as they move them from property to property. We're lucky enough to have 2 drovers who call the Bucking Bull their watering hole. These 2 men are just the most amazing fellows. They live for their cattle. They spend 90% of their time on the road with their cows and their dogs. Sometimes their partners are with them as well. They are just true blue Aussie blokes. Snake recently had an incident where his car caught fire on the side of the road. He was very, very lucky to get out with his life. He had a nasty burn on his arm. He lost everything, all his quad bike and all these bits and pieces that go with the droving job. But that afternoon he was back in here with a smile on his face, ready for a nice cold beer. The town of Coonamble itself is famous for the nickname Hall of Fame. Everyone has a nickname, and an outsider has no idea who you're talking about when you use their nickname, or if you know them by their nickname, most people don't even know what their real name is. To the west of Coonamble is the Macquarie Marshes. This is a very important breeding ground for many native birds. There's a thriving wild pig industry where most of the meat gets exported to Germany. There are very strict regulations for the hunting and killing of the pigs. The pigs need to be placed in a chiller in a timely manner. It's also a very popular pastime for locals, and many people travel hundreds of kilometres to come here to go pigging. Some people will go pigging with specially trained dogs, others with rifles, just for the fun. To the east of Coonamble are the Warrumbungles. Coonamble is very flat. The Warrumbungles rise up thousands of feet and can be seen for 30 or 40 kilometres away. The Siding Springs Observatory is in the Warrumbungles, built here because of the particularly dark sky. The skies in this region are absolutely amazing. You only have to go a few kilometres out of town and the stars feel like you could just reach up and touch them. Stargazers from around the world come here for the dark skies. In this episode, I just wanted to give an overview of what we will be talking about in the upcoming episodes. Why would a middle-aged couple decide that they need to own a country pub? In 2018, we were looking to buy an investment property. Our friend Trevor, who was managing a country pub at the time, suggested we have a look at the pub as it had just come up for sale. We came out and had a look and thought, why not? What could possibly go wrong? Trevor was going to manage it for us. We would stay in Sydney and just come to visit every now and then and maybe just have a bit of fun. Trevor was managing the pub for his cousin Michael, who had the lease on it, and he wanted to get out of the lease as he had fallen in love with a local girl, a very friendly local girl who had 9 children to 9 different fathers. They had intended to go travelling, and it just seemed perfect for someone to buy the pub, which would get him out of the lease, and Trevor would manage it for us. It sounded perfect for everyone. Within a very short year of buying the pub, Trevor had decided to move on, and that's how I became an accidental counsellor. The pub itself has just had its 100th birthday in 2024. It was actually built in 1888 as a single-storey timber pub. In 1924, the timber pub was demolished and the current building was built in its place. The building is very sturdy and made of concrete. It's a typical Aussie pub with a veranda all around the outside, a huge cellar, which is something I always wanted, and a very big bar, pool room, a restaurant on the ground floor, and accommodation upstairs. It's just a typical Aussie pub. As with most 100-year-old buildings, there was a lot of work to be done. We decided to put out the biggest fires first. We had leaky pipes, electrical problems, and a few other surprises that we discovered quite quickly after we signed on the dotted line. We started looking into the history of the pub and discovered that there was at least one murder, several publican suicides, our very own resident ghost, and everyone in town has either worked here, had sex here, or both. I say that I'm an accidental counsellor because I just thought I would be pulling beers and entertaining people, but it's not just serving beers and making sure that everyone has a good time. I didn't realise that I had to be a doctor, a psychologist, an accountant, a solicitor, a marriage counsellor, as well as an electrician, plumber, a builder, and a chef. From pulling burrs out of people's fingers to reading bank passbooks to make sure that the right amount had gone into the bank, to reading a letter to one customer telling him that he only had a few weeks to live. Young Bill, who was 91 when he passed away, used to come in with his bank passbook, which was still a handwritten passbook because he insisted that's how the bank did it for him. We'd sit down together over a beer and we would go through every entry in the passbook so that he could reconcile in his mind that he was being paid the correct amount. One day young Bill came in and he told me he had a letter from Medibank. He asked me to open the letter and read it to him. The letter told Bill that his premium was going up for the year. Bill insisted that I call Medibank on his behalf. When the young girl answered the phone, she of course asked me if I was family, to which I replied no, and she said she needed to speak to Bill. I handed the phone to Bill, and Bill said, "What?" and then handed the phone back to me, to which the young girl said, "You've been verified, what can I help you with?" Bill was 91 and his wife was in a nursing home, and it turns out he'd been paying pregnancy cover premiums for many years, and many other things that he didn't require anymore. When Bill instructed me to ask if he could have a reduction in his premiums, the girl said no, that everything was bundled together. So Bill said, "Cancel it." So I did. 95-year-old Dave, who lives 80 kilometres out of Coonamble in a tiny little town called Quambone, drives into Coonamble quite often just for a visit. Dave was a big drinker and a fighter in his early years, but now he drinks Diet Coke. He comes in for a chat, has a little bet, and then heads home. One day he came in to visit and told me that he had an itchy head. A few weeks earlier, David had a medical procedure and he said that the wound was itchy. I removed the band-aid to discover that the wound was full of maggots. My first thought was, I don't get paid enough for this. And then I very quickly realised that this was my problem. After cleaning the wound and replacing the band-aid, Dave headed off back home with a smile on his face. Next time, I'll tell you about a murder at the hotel, Singo, the most unconventional copper in the world.
The reason he got transferred to here because he was in the mounted police and he kept falling off the horse drunk. He had a different way of policing, but everybody knew exactly where they stood, and he'd behave himself within reason. We loved him and he loved it out here.
The smelliest tree in New South Wales, and a few other consultations. Thanks for listening to The Accidental Counsellor. See you next time.